Здравствуйте! Как дела? В прошлый раз мы с вами говорили о многих вещах. We talked about an awful lot of things last time, including a tremendous amount of school vocabulary, which I'm sure you were thrilled about. We also looked at first and second conjugation verbs in great detail. We looked at some prepositional case, and of course, we had a couple dialogues as usual. Well, this time, here are the objectives of our lesson. Take a look at that. We're going to go on with school things. We will discuss language abilities, how well you speak, understand, write, read, etc. Do a review of conjugation of verbs. Then we'll talk about how it is expressed. And of course, as usual, we've got vocabulary and syntax, that is the structure of sentences, just basically as a part of the dialogues, a part of the things that are introduced as new grammar, a part of the review, etc. Let's go ahead and take a look at a dialogue. This one is simply a review from what we did before. That's the one where we deal with going to school, who studies what, etc. That'll be useful this lesson. Take a look.
Владимир, ты знаешь, что сейчас делают твои московские друзья?
А кто именно тебя интересует?
Ну, например, Саша Демидов. Он работает или учится?
Саша Демидов сейчас находится в Германии.
В Германии?
Да, в Германии. Его отец работает там в компании.
А Саша учится там?
Да, Саша учится там в институте.
Понятно. Так он уже не ученик, не школьник, а студент.
Да, он на первом курсе.
Понятно. А что делает Антон Бубенов?
Антон Бубенов сейчас учится в институте в Москве.
Ты знаешь, что он изучает?
Он изучает физику, математику, биологию и химию.
Очень интересно. А что делает такая очень красивая девочка в вашем классе? О, я забыла, как ее зовут?
Оля Архипова?
Да, Оля Архипова.
Она симпатичная, но не очень красивая, не самая красивая девочка в классе. Я не знаю точно, что она сейчас делает.
Ну, учится?
Я думаю, она сейчас ходит в институт.
А в какой?
Мне кажется, она ходит в Московский государственный университет.
Понятно. А что она изучает?
Она изучает философию, искусство, русский, английский язык.
Она очень серьезная девочка. Я думаю, она хорошая студентка. Передай ей привет.
Хорошо.
That was the dialogue that deals with simply studying something, going to school, etc. We've looked at it, we took it apart, you know everything about it. The next one more or less ties into this one, and that deals with what we're doing today, studying foreign languages. Take a look, please.
Таня,
Да?
я читаю книгу на немецком языке.
Интересная?
Да, но я много не понимаю. Ты знаешь немецкий язык?
Ой, нет, к сожалению, я не знаю немецкого языка. А ты учишь немецкий?
Да, я учу немецкий язык в институте.
Понятно. А ты уже говоришь по-немецки?
Я плохо говорю. Я хорошо читаю и пишу, но плохо говорю и понимаю.
А какие еще языки ты знаешь?
Я знаю русский и английский. Русский я знаю очень хорошо, потому что это мой родной язык. Английский я уже учу 10 лет. Ну и тоже знаю его очень хорошо. И вот учу немецкий.
Понятно. Ты хорошо знаешь русский, английский, учишь немецкий. Прекрасно.
Да, но вот с немецкой у меня еще много проблем.
Понятно. Желаю успеха.
Okay. Очень хорошо. Ну что ж, в этом диалоге мы с вами разобрались о том, как сказать «я изучаю язык», «я говорю», «я пишу», «я читаю», я понимаю и так далее. So in this one we figured out how to say that you study a language, you write, you understand, you read, etc. Wasn't so bad. Let's go ahead and take it apart sentence by sentence. The first part. Таня, я читаю книгу на немецком языке и не понимаю. Я читаю книгу. I'm reading a book на немецком языке. The book is in German. Written in German. That's why we're putting this на немецком языке rather than по-немецки. И не понимаю and don't understand. Meaning не понимаю ее. Don't understand it. The book. Ты знаешь немецкий? Do you know German? Хорошо. И дальше? Нет, к сожалению, я не знаю. К сожалению. Try saying it with me. К сожалению. К сожалению. Unfortunately. Literally to regret. So, no, unfortunately, I don't know. А ты учишь немецкий язык? She asks. And are you studying German? Now, studying the language, we do not use по-немецки or на немецком, but rather немецкий itself, plus язык. Да, я учу немецкий в институте. Yes, I'm studying German at the institute. Немецкий, abbreviation of немецкий язык. Очень хорошо. Дальше. А ты говоришь по-немецки? And do you speak German? Плохо, he answers. So speaking, reading, understanding, and writing, you do it by means of that language, using the language, по-немецки, rather than немецкий язык or на немецком. Плохо, poorly, he says. Я хорошо читаю и пишу. I well read and write. I can read and write it pretty well, но плохо говорю и понимаю. But badly speak and understand. We're still using по-немецки for all of those. And describing the verbs читаю, read, пишу, write, and then говорю and понимаю by means of adverbs such as хорошо, well, or плохо, badly, poorly. Очень хорошо. And she asks for some more things. А какие еще языки ты знаешь? And which more languages do you know? What other languages? Языки being a plural noun requires какие for what? Which? Хорошо? And Vladimir answers. Я знаю английский и русский. I know English and Russian, meaning английский и русский языки, the languages themselves. So not по-русски, not на русском, but английский и русский. Nominative case, just the adjective. Русский – мой родной язык. Russian is my native tongue, the language I grew up speaking. Конечно, я его очень хорошо знаю. Literally it says, of course, I him very well know. Meaning, of course, I know it, его. But that relates to язык, which is an on, masculine noun, so we say его when it's a direct object. So, русский мой родной язык, Russian is my mother's tongue, of course I know it well. Конечно, я его очень хорошо знаю. And now to English. Посмотрите. А английский я учу уже 10 лет. And English I study already 10 years. Means I've been studying it. When something has been going on and still is happening, we just use present tense verbs. So, like I've been living is simply I live, я живу. Хорошо? Right, and that's what he's saying. И я живу в Америке. And I live in America. Поэтому, therefore, that's why. That answers, shows the reason why something is happening. Почему, why, give the reason and then say поэтому, that's why. Я его, meaning язык, тоже очень хорошо знаю. So, английский я учу уже 10 лет, и я живу в Америке, поэтому я его тоже очень хорошо знаю. Хорошо? And Tanya praises him. Здорово! Great! Здорово! 3-4. Здорово! Ты знаешь русский, английский и немецкий. You know those 3 languages. And he kind of limits what he said before. Ну, немецкий я еще только учу. Ну, this kind of, well, ну, Немецкий я еще только учу. German I'm still only studying. I'm just learning it. And then the final exchange. У меня с ним есть пока проблемы. Literally, I with it still so far have problems. Есть проблемы. There are problems. Пока still. So, if you wanted to distill this to a simple sentence, you'd have пока есть проблемы. There are still problems. У меня с ним simply says I have some problems with it. And Tanya wishes him the best. Желаю успеха. Literally, wish you success. So, hope everything goes well. Hope you learn it. Спасибо, he says. Очень хорошо. So, studying foreign languages. One verb that we used previously was изучать. Pretty straightforward first conjugation verb. You know exactly what to do with it. Take a look at what it looks like. Изучать, to study. Since it ends in at, get rid of just the мягкий знак, keep the изуча part constant, and put the endings that you used to using for the first conjugation. Я изучаю, I study, plus direct object, right? Like я изучаю русский. Okay, you study, ты изучаешь. Let's go through it. Please repeat after me. Он изучает. Она тоже изучает. Мы изучаем. Вы изучаете. And они изучают. Очень хорошо. We had another verb. This time a second conjugation verb in this following phrase. Посмотрите. Ты учишь немецкий язык. This учишь. Учишь немецкий. Same thing as изучаешь. But actually it's a shorter verb, so it's used a lot. That's a second conjugation. An eat verb. There it is. It ends in eat, so it's a second conjugation verb. That must be it. Хорошо. And you know what to do with the second conjugation verbs. You have seen the verb говорить. Take a look at it once again, see how the whole thing plays out. So when you've got a verb ending in eat, chances are it's second conjugation, which means get rid of the entire eat ending and use the second conjugation, the e-based endings for it. So говорить, trash, eat, put a you for ya. Я говорю, I speak. Like, я говорю по-русски, I speak Russian. Ты говоришь по-английски, you speak English. Он говорит по-испански, he speaks Spanish. Она говорит по-немецки, she speaks German. Мы говорим по-китайски, we speak Chinese. Вы говорите по-японски, you speak Japanese. Они говорят по-итальянски, they speak Italian. You'll see those languages again, I promise. Хорошо. Alright, so учить is going to be very, very similar to говорить. Take a look and see how that works. Учить ends in eat, trash it. Go ahead and use the endings you should, but remember there was that first spelling rule that says do not use a you or ya after che, sha, sha, etc. So instead of you, you're gonna replace it with an u, and you get я учу. So I study something. Я учу. Okay? You study. Ты учишь. Okay? So let's go back up to the beginning. Я учу английский. I'm studying English. Ты учишь русский. Она учит немецкий. She's studying German. Он учит китайский. He's studying Chinese. Мы учим японский. We're studying Japanese. Вы учите суахили. Whatever it might be. Хорошо? So, вы учите. Они учат plus any direct object. We are studying a particular subject. Очень хорошо. Ну что ж. Oh yeah, one more thing. Remember we had 3 ways of saying Russian. And that's what I've been emphasizing all this lesson. You can say по-русски, you can say на русском языке, or русский язык. Okay? The examples that we had were the following. One thing was я говорю по-русски. I speak Russian. По-русски. Okay? When you speak, write, understand, or read, go ahead and use по-русски. Okay? However, if you want to say that you are studying the language, or you know the language, use русский язык, not by means of Russian, which is по-русски, but the language itself, русский язык. As in this example, я изучаю русский язык. Очень хорошо. And if you want to say that something is done in that language, like the book, you will have this. Эта книга на русском языке. This is the book in Russian. Очень хорошо. Так, same way as with Russian, we had German throughout this dialogue. We had this я говорю по-немецки. I speak German. Хорошо? По-немецки. Just like по-русски. Отлично. Or я изучаю немецкий язык. Хорошо? Or the next one, эта книга на немецком языке. Очень хорошо. One more thing. We saw a really tricky verb in the following phrase. Я хорошо пишу по-немецки. This пишу, excuse me, is the one that I'm talking about, has a sh in it, but in fact, the infinitive for it looks like that. It's a писать. Take a look at it, please. Писать has an S in it, but in fact, that S is going to be replaced with a sh completely. You will drop it. Take a look and see how the entire conjugation of that verb looks. So писать ends in an at must be first conjugation, which means you'll get rid of just the Т мягкий знак. Well, not really. You will replace this entire писа with a пиш. Okay? So to write писать, the infinitive, like я люблю писать, I like writing. Хорошо? But once you start conjugating it, get a sh in it. Я пишу, I'm writing. Я пишу 3-4. Хорошо? Then the accent shifts to the beginning. Ты пишешь. Еще раз. Ты пишешь. Он пишет. Она пишет. Мы пишем. Вы пишете. Они пишут. Очень хорошо. That's a tricky verb, and make sure that you do replace that sa with a she. It is really, really crucial. That's one verb on which you can make a true fool out of yourself if you do not replace sa with a she. Хорошо. No details on what I mean. Хорошо. Alright. Let's go ahead and take a look at something else. We've been talking about languages. I used some of the new ones like по-китайски, китайский язык, на японском языке, etc. Let's see a list of those languages. We know английский. And as I go through it, please repeat after me. Английский, русский, немецкий, французский, French, испанский, Spanish, китайский, Chinese, китайский. Китай is the way Russians say China. I'm not too sure where that came from, but it's interesting. Японский, японский, Japanese, итальянский, Italian. So of course with all of those you will use язык if you wanted to. Let's go through it quickly with язык. Английский язык, русский язык, немецкий язык, французский язык, испанский язык, китайский язык, Chinese language, японский язык, Japanese, итальянский язык, Italian. Очень хорошо. Okay, so those phrases, итальянский, японский, китайский, will work with phrases like this. Я изучаю японский. I am studying Japanese. The language itself. Хорошо? Or я не знаю немецкий. I don't know German. Хорошо? Don't know the language itself. Not something in it, but the whole thing. Хорошо? Or something like я люблю китайский. I like Chinese. The language. Meaning я люблю китайский язык. Хорошо? Very often you will have to use different forms. You will have to use the following. Take a look at the whole table. Going through the same languages with a pa and dropping и краткое at the end gives us in English, in Russian, etc. All the way through in Italian. speaking, writing, reading, understanding, etc. So, по-английски, по-русски, по-немецки, literally by means of German. Like, я не говорю по-немецки. I do not communicate using German. Don't know it. Хорошо? По-французски, по-испански, по-китайски, in Chinese, по-японски, in Japanese, по-итальянски. Хорошо. So that will work with things like я не понимаю по-немецки. I do not understand in German, literally. Я не понимаю по-немецки. Or я пишу по-японски. I write in Japanese. In English, you can just say я пишу по-японски, I write Japanese. In Russian, it's in the language. What you write is the direct object. How you write it is по-японски. Literally in that Japanese way. Хорошо? Or another one, я говорю по-японски. Or я говорю по-китайски, whatever it might be. Or the next thing here, я читаю по-итальянски. I read Italian. No, you don't read the language itself, you read something in it. That's how Russians think about it, at least. So, я читаю по-итальянски. I read in Italian. Очень хорошо. A few quick things. We had another interesting phrase there, and that was родной язык, a native language. Родной means native, dear to one. In English, this whole thing is usually said as mother's tongue or something like that. Да? Родной язык. Например, мой родной язык русский. And most of you would say мой родной язык испанский, мой родной язык английский, whatever it might be. Хорошо? Okay, a few ways of saying cool. Посмотрите. Здорово is what, excuse me, Tanya said to Vladimir, having realized that he knows 3 languages. Здорово. Great. Хорошо? Another one would be классно. That's the one that's used an awful lot. Классно. Very often combined with the thumb, right? Классно. Excellent. Great. Очень хорошо. Ну что ж. One more thing we're going to do today is take a look at some things that relate to the gender of the nouns. As you may remember, nouns that end in a consonant or мягкий знак are most likely to be masculine. Let's go ahead and look at the whole table and see how that makes sense. So a consonant ending or a мягкий знак ending tells us that's gonna be a so-called он noun, like a he noun. Хорошо? That could be anything starting with a дом. Хорошо? A house. If you then need to say it is mine, this is a house, это дом, it's mine, you will say он, мой. That's what I mean by a masculine noun being an он noun. Хорошо? If a noun ends in а, я, or мягкий знак, it's most likely to be a feminine, an она noun. Хорошо? If a noun ends in an о, е, or ё, it's gonna be an оно, it noun, neuter. Хорошо? Then most of those can be put into plural. The endings that they will most likely get will be y and и. Хорошо? That makes them into they nouns. Хорошо? Они. Очень хорошо. So, the examples that we can come up with here is things like где дом? Where is the house? Хорошо? And if you want to simply say here it is, the it is going to depend on the gender of the дом. And since we know that дом is in fact masculine, to say here it is, you will say вот он. Он for дом. Хорошо? So, где дом? Вот он. Хорошо? If you're dealing with something feminine, you will have где машина? Where is the car? And the answer here it is, but it in fact is she. So literally you're saying he or she. Вот она. Где машина? Вот она. Очень хорошо. Следующее. Где окно? Where's the window? Вот оно. Окно ending in оно tells you that it's going to be a neuter noun and you will use оно, actual it. to say here it is. Извините. И, наконец, где деньги? The next one. Где деньги? Where is the money is how we say it in English, but in Russian, please note that деньги in fact ends in an E, must be a plural noun. So then, вот они, here they are. Money is they. Очень хорошо. Так, let's go ahead and spend some time dealing with something a little more fun than heavy-duty grammar and по-английски, по-французски, на французском, etc. A little bit of non-verbal communication. In fact, I was thinking about all the grammar we've gone through, and I was thinking that I was really tired of it. That was plenty. And that is how a Russian would say, I'm full of this. It's up to here. You know, kind of like, I'm all filled up with that. So, that could be kind of a threatening gesture, saying that this is it. Like, enough. Okay? Or simply an indication that you're sick and tired of something. Okay? Another gesture is that. Same idea. You're basically showing that you're up to here with something. Just imagine having too much to eat and you feel like that food is pretty close to where it first came into your body from. Okay? So that's where all of these gestures originate from. Хорошо. Okay, another little gesture. When you're sleepy, you may do that to indicate that in fact you are sleepy. Or let's say you're telling a kid that, hey, it's nighttime and you don't want to interrupt somebody's conversation. Imagine having a family gathering of sorts. That's often used. Хорошо? Another thing is this strange gesture. When you want to say, I swear that that's true, you'll often see a Russian do that, kind of flicking one's tooth. I'll go into slightly greater detail about why that would be done later. The idea of it is, I would give my tooth to prove to you that that's true. You won't have everybody do that, but that gesture will certainly be very well recognized. Okay, and to top things off, let's go ahead and look at a saying. How could we not? Куй железо пока горячо, which literally says, strike iron while it's hot. So, куй is imperative. Куй железо пока горячо. You'll see it on your sheet there. Хорошо. So, today we did a whole bunch of things. Namely, we discussed language abilities, and I'll ask you to write something describing your own. We reviewed verb conjugations. We talked about expressing it, and saw a lot of vocabulary and syntax. Очень хорошо. And your homework is to conjugate the verbs писать, идти, учить, and любить. Also, write a paragraph about knowing a language. Something like combining what you've done before. Меня зовут such and such. Я говорю по-немецки, я говорю по-русски, я читаю, etc. Just let yourself go, see what you can come up with. And finally, an exercise 9.3 on page 168 out of your textbook. Большое спасибо. До свидания. Здравствуйте! Как дела? You will not believe what I've got in store for you today. We're going to count to the point that you're going to be truly sick of it. We're going to count time, hours, minutes, all kinds of things. First, let's go ahead and see what we did last time. We reviewed the conjugations of first and second conjugation verbs. We have talked about some foreign language abilities. Вы говорите, вы пишете по-немецки, по-итальянски, etc. We have talked about expressing of it, so a lot of vocabulary, etc. Now, to go ahead and review what we did, let's look at the dialogue speaking foreign language once again.
Таня,
Да?
я читаю книгу на немецком языке.
Интересная?
Да, но я много не понимаю. Ты знаешь немецкий язык?
Ой, нет, к сожалению, я не знаю немецкого языка. А ты учишь немецкий?
Да, я учу немецкий язык в институте.
Понятно. А ты уже говоришь по-немецки?
Я плохо говорю. Я хорошо читаю и пишу, но плохо говорю и понимаю.
А какие еще языки ты знаешь?
Я знаю русский и английский. Русский я знаю очень хорошо, потому что это мой родной язык. Английский я уже учу 10 лет. Ну и тоже знаю его очень хорошо. И вот учу немецкий.
Понятно. Ты хорошо знаешь русский, английский и учишь немецкий. Прекрасно.
Да, но вот с немецкой у меня еще много проблем.
Понятно. Желаю успеха.
Очень хорошо. Этот диалог в какой-то мере обобщает то, что мы с вами сделали на прошлом уроке. This dialogue in a way summarizes everything that we did last lesson. This time our objectives are the following. Посмотрите, we're going to use some adverbs, mostly dealing with how you speak, how well you write in a foreign language. We'll review some time phrases very briefly, but then we'll go into exact time expressions, which will be things like, 5:32 in the morning. Very tough stuff, very intensive. And we'll take a quick look at reflexive verbs. That's still to come. Очень хорошо. So, tying into those phrases such as я пишу по-немецки, я говорю по-японски, etc. Let's go ahead and look at a few of them. Посмотрите. Я хорошо читаю по-немецки. What we're doing here is using the adverb хорошо to describe how well reading in German is done here. So, those хорошо, плохо, неплохо, etc. All of the same ones that we've learned to use in things like how are you, как дела, хорошо, спасибо, or неплохо. We're going to use most of them. We're going to use some other adverbs that will make more sense in this particular context. So, take a look at another phrase. Я плохо понимаю по-немецки. I poorly understand German. Плохо describes how you понимаю, how you understand it. Хорошо? Another one. Я неплохо пишу по-немецки. I not badly, meaning pretty well, пишу по-немецки. I write German pretty well. Хорошо? So far we've used хорошо, плохо, неплохо, all that we know. And the next one is a bit new. Я свободно говорю по-немецки. I fluently, freely speak German. Хорошо? So, the range that you may hear back asking the question, вы говорите по-немецки? Here's the question. Вы говорите по-немецки? Do you speak German? Or any other language, right? You ask somebody, вы говорите по-русски? The person may tell you a whole bunch of things. Here are some possibilities. Take a look at that. Чуть-чуть, usually pronounced as чуть-чуть, a tiny little bit. You may actually have a совсем чуть-чуть, a completely little bit, just barely speak or write or read, etc. Then from there we go to плохо, poorly, or очень плохо, very badly, My German truly is horrible. You'd say, я очень плохо говорю по-немецки. Okay, then немного, right underneath плохо, a little. Or below it, немножко. Same thing, a little bit, more colloquial. And of course you can use совсем with them. Just completely tiny bit. Very little bit. So, совсем немного, or simply немножко. Okay, then you can go to more positive things such as неплохо. So, I speak Spanish pretty well. Я неплохо говорю по-испански. You could even say очень неплохо. Very not bad, right? Pretty well. So, я очень неплохо пишу по-японски. I write Japanese pretty well. Хорошо. Well. Good. Очень хорошо. Very well. And then finally, свободно. Freely, fluently, with no trouble whatsoever. Хорошо? That's the range that we've got. So, you ask somebody, вы говорите по-немецки, speak German, the person may actually tell you something like, да, свободно, я немец. Yeah, fluently, I am German. Хорошо? Who knows? Or maybe if one doesn't, that person would say, нет, не говорю. No, I do not speak. Нет, не говорю. Хорошо? Or even, нет, совсем не говорю. Совсем is usually used in negative phrases. Either совсем немножко, completely a little bit, or like here, completely do not speak, meaning I speak none at all. Хорошо? Отлично. Ну что ж, next thing for us to review would be time. I'm sure you remember how we said things like 1 hour or 1 o'clock. We had a whole chart full of those. Let's review that. So 1 o'clock or 1 hour is час or один час. Один is often omitted, dropped. So 2 o'clock, 2 часа, same as 2 hours. Just depends on the context, on how it's used. 3 часа, 3 hours. 4 часа, 4 hours. So час, the one form is 1. Then 2 through 4, we've got the часа form with an I at the end. And then at 5, we're going to get something different. That is часов. I'm sure you recall. 5 часов, 5 o'clock. 6 часов, 6 o'clock. 7 часов, 7, 8 часов, 8, 9 часов, either 9 hours or 9 o'clock, just depends on where you use it. 10 часов, 10 o'clock. 11 часов, try that one once again. 11 часов, 11 часов. And then 12 часов. So that meant 3 o'clock or 3 hours, for 3 hours. For example, you could have a sentence, я читаю книгу 3 часа. I've been reading a book for 3 hours. That could be an answer to a question, сколько времени ты читаешь книгу? Here's that question. Сколько времени ты читаешь книгу? How much time have you been reading this book? Да? How long have you been reading? So, сколько времени is either what time is it or for how long. Again, it depends on the context. Not that hard. So the answer to that question once again was я читаю книгу 3 часа. I've been reading the book 3 hours. Хорошо. Отлично. Or another phrase, you could have something like сейчас 3 часа ночи. Now is 3 o'clock at night. Ночи, in the middle of the night. Да? Хорошо. That could be an answer to the question сколько сейчас времени. You don't have to break up сколько and времени. You could just say сколько времени сейчас. What time is it now? Хорошо? But more commonly, сколько сейчас времени. Okay? So, and the answer to that once again was сейчас 3 часа ночи. That ночи is what I'd like to remind you about as well. That was of night. Хорошо? We have also seen things like 6 часов утра. 6 o'clock in the morning. Хорошо? And also 2 часа дня. The whole phrase is сейчас 2 часа дня. Now it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Literally 2 hours of day. Хорошо? And then finally, сейчас 8 часов вечера. 8 o'clock in the evening. Хорошо? Отлично. Let me remind you how that whole idea of 4 o'clock at night but 7 o'clock in the evening is done in Russian. Take a look at this chart. So from approximately 5 a.m., maybe 4 a.m. till 12 p.m., that is noon, everything is gonna be утро. That's the morning in the Russian understanding of it. Хорошо? Okay, so from noon until about 5-6 p.m., that's gonna be дня. Okay, so 4 o'clock in the afternoon is gonna be 4 часа дня. Okay, maybe around 5 o'clock you're going to start referring to it as evening. Maybe 6, who knows? Depending on, when the time, when the sun goes down, etc. So 5 p.m. till about midnight, all the way through midnight, is gonna be вечера rather than ночи. So 11 at night in English, in Russian, 11 часов вечера, still in the evening, вечера. And then from midnight until whatever you consider to be morning, 5 o'clock maybe, you're gonna call it ночи. Хорошо? Отлично. So, this is how you ask at what time something is happening. You would say во сколько, and then follow it up with whatever you're asking about. Like, во сколько начинается фильм? At what time does the movie begin? Хорошо? So, to say at that time, not just to say it is 1 o'clock, сейчас час, but rather it begins at 1. Just add a v to what you just saw, that entire bunch. Simply add a v to it, and you're going to end up with saying at that time. Take a look and see. В час, at 1, sometimes в один час. Very seldom though. Usually at 1, в час. That could be в час ночи, 1 at night, or в час дня, 1 in the afternoon. В 2 часа, в 3 часа, at 3, в 4 часа. Now that does not mean for 4 hours, but exactly at 4 o'clock. В 4 часа. Хорошо? That could be в 4 часа ночи, at 4 at night, или может быть в 4 часа дня, 4 in the afternoon. Хорошо? And then, just as you would expect, в 5 часов, at 5. And since v should be run into the next word, just make it flow. В 5 часов, в 6 часов, в 7 часов, at 7. That could be в 7 часов утра, 7 in the morning. В 7 часов вечера, at 7 in the evening. В 8 часов, at 8. В 9 часов. If you feel like you don't want to say часов any more than you have to, drop it. It'll be alright. Just say в 9, at 9. You could simply say в 9 вечера, at 9 in the evening. Хорошо? So that's how all of those are going to go. Хорошо. Naturally, not everything begins right on the hour, which brings us to the next measurement, and that is minutes. Хорошо? 1 minute. Take a look and see how we say that. Одна минута. Or simply минута. Okay, so for 1 we've got минута, then for 2 through 4, минуты, such as две минуты. Минута being feminine makes us use this feminine form for 2, and it is две rather than два. Хорошо? So 2 minutes, 2 минуты. 3 минуты, 3 minutes. 4 минуты, 4, and going on to 5 минут, 5 minutes. Go ahead and take a look at the next one. 6 минут, 6 minutes. That could be duration of time, whatever lasted 6 minutes, or it's, let's say, 1:06. Час 6 минут. Да? 1 and 6 minutes. Хорошо? 7 минут, 8 минут, 8 minutes, 9 минут, 10 минут. Looks like a great opportunity to review numbers. That's just what we're doing. Next batch. We have got 11 минут. Please say it with me. 11 минут. 12 минут. 12 minutes. 13 минут. 14 минут. 15 minut. Please repeat it, because knowing how to say those numbers correctly is truly crucial. So back to 15 minut. And the next bunch, извините, 16 минут, 17 минут, 18 минут, 19 минут, 20 минут. Remember what I said about the way you count things? For 1 you've got one form, like 1 час, then for 2 through 4 you've got another one, часа. So 2, 3, 4 часа. But then for 5 you get часов. So here we're doing the same thing. Start out with minuta, then minuty, then minut. But that third form, like часов or minut, only lasts through 20. Once you hit 21, you're going to go back to minuta or час. So 21 hours or 21 o'clock? That doesn't sound right. You would have 21 час or 21 minuta. Take a look and see how that goes. So 21 minuta, and then for 2 through 4 we're back to minuty. So 22 minuty, 22 minutes, 23 minuty, 24 minuty, and then at 5 again we switch to minut. So 25 minut, 26 minut, 27 minut, etc., etc. Now, we've got 1 through 20 pretty much covered. How about 30? That would be 30 minut. Хорошо? But then at 31, you're going to get a minuta again, right? So 31 minutes, 31 minuta. Хорошо? 32, 32 минуты. Хорошо? 35, 35 минут. Очень хорошо. And then 39 минут. Прекрасно. Which is the time for 40. 40. 40 минут. There it is. The next one. 40 минут. Хорошо? 40. 40. Прекрасно. 41 minutes. Same idea. It's back to 1. So use minuta again. 41 минута. Хорошо? Теперь how about 43? 43 минуты. Хорошо? 46. 46 минут. Хорошо? 49, 49 минут. Time for 50, and it is 50. 50 if you run it quickly. 50. So 50 minutes, 50 минут. Once you hit 51, back to minuta. 51 minuta. This is tedious, but it's good practice. Bear with me, please. 52 minutes, 52 минуты, 54, 54, there it is, 58, 58. That's it so far. Хорошо. Okay. Now let's go ahead and try to combine what we've learned. What you see in front of you here is в 1 час 30 минут ночи. And what that is at 1:30 at night. The whole thing is at 1 hour 30 minutes of the night, right? But if you want to say at 1:30, just say час 30. What time? Afternoon, дня, night, ночи. What we have here, once again, is в час 30 ночи. Хорошо. And another example. В 6 часов 40 минут утра. That's the whole thing. At 6 hours and 40 minutes of the morning. That just means at 6:40 in the morning. If you know we're talking about morning, skip the утра part. And of course, skip the часов and minut. Don't bother with them. People will understand 6:40. So 6:40 at 6:40. If you want to be time specific, time of the day, в 6:40 утра. Очень хорошо. Another example. В 2 часа 32 минуты дня. At 2:32 in the afternoon. Or just boil it all down to в 2:32 минуты. Or в 2:32. Хорошо? Отлично. If something's happening at 3:35, which is the next example you've got, в 3 часа 35 минут ночи. The whole thing. And it's in the middle of the night. Boil it down to в 3:35. Хорошо? Отлично. Let's just start reducing those to something more pronounceable. В 9:39 at 9:39. Хорошо? Or в 4:50, 4:50 in the afternoon, so в 4:50 дня. Хорошо? At 11:58, в 11:58. That of course could be вечера, in the evening, or утра, I presume. Хорошо? Nobody speaks that way, so unless you doing things right on the minute, you can always say for what we just saw approximately at 12, and that's the next one. It says примерно в 12 дня. If it is in fact happening in the afternoon, if you're talking about that happening at night, you would say примерно в 12 ночи, and that's the next one. Примерно в 12 ночи. Очень хорошо. I don't know about you, but I think this review of numbers has been pretty tedious and excruciating, so let's get to something a little simpler, just a plain dialogue, which I will take apart right here in this lesson, let you hear it again, and that'll be a great illustration of how time is referred to. Пожалуйста. Таня, что ты делаешь?
Как что? Как всегда, читаю русскую газету. А ты что делаешь?
Я пишу план урока в университете.
А во сколько начинается твой урок?
Обычно я начинаю лекцию в 10 часов, но сегодня она начинается в 10:30. Таня, а что вы делаете сегодня вечером?
А сегодня вечером мы идем в кино.
Да, и как называется фильм?
Маска Зорро. Говорят, ничего.
Серьезно? А во сколько начинается?
Примерно в 9.
Да, утра?
Как утра? Конечно, вечером.
Ну да. Ну, пока.
Пока.
So, how was that? I was saying that would be something better than what we did. I'm not sure that it's actually better. I think it's the time to review that saying. Из двух зол выбирай меньшее. Out of two evils, choose the lesser one. So, из двух зол выбирай меньшее. In fact, that dialogue seemed rather ridiculous, and let's get through it pretty quickly. Привет, Таня, что ты делаешь? Hi, Tanya, what you doing? Как что? What do you mean, what? This как is often used as как? What do you mean? How can that be that you're asking that dumb question? Как что? Как всегда, as always, читаю русскую газету. I'm reading a Russian newspaper. Хорошо. And the next. А ты, Дмитрий, что делаешь? And what are you, Dmitry, doing? By the way, we've switched to ты here. Informal, very casual. And I answer. А я пишу план урока в университете. And I'm writing a plan of a lesson. So, a lesson plan at the university. Хорошо. And the next question. А во сколько начинается твой урок? Now that's interesting stuff. Начинается. Begins. The lesson begins with that sigh at the end. Okay, but I answer the question saying обычно я начинаю лекцию в 10. Usually I begin, not the lesson begins, but I begin, so there is no ся at the end. That's the reflexive verb with a ся and regular kind without. So, usually I begin the lecture at 10, но сегодня она начинается в 10:30. But today it begins at 10:30. Хорошо. And the next question that I feel like asking is, Таня, что вы делаете сегодня вечером? And what are you, plural, because I'm saying ты to her, doing tonight? So I'm not inviting myself into her plans, I'm just saying, what are you guys doing? Okay? And she says, мы идем в кино. We're going to the movies. А как называется фильм? And how is the movie called? And she answers, Маска Зорро. Mask of Zorro, I guess. Which more or less times the time when this was recorded. Говорят, что ничего. They say it's nothing. What in the world is she saying? She's saying ничего, meaning not bad. They say it's all right, not too bad, etc. That's the Russian psyche for you. Ничего. Nothing meaning okay. So, and the next question, а во сколько он начинается? And when does it begin? And the answer примерно в 9, approximately at 9. And a truly dumb question on my part, утра? In the morning? I was asking about evening plans. Нет, конечно, вечера. No, of course not in the evening. Ну, пока. So, bye. So, good time to wrap it up. Хорошо. Okay. A few interesting things in there. And I would like you to actually, now that you know exactly what's happening in it, see it once again. There you are. Таня, что ты делаешь?
Как что? Как всегда, читаю русскую газету. А ты что делаешь?
Я пишу план урока в университете.
А во сколько начинается твой урок?
Обычно я начинаю лекцию в 10 часов, но сегодня она начинается в 10:30. Таня, а что вы делаете сегодня вечером?
Сегодня вечером мы идем в кино.
Да, и как называется фильм?
Маска Зорро. Говорят, ничего.
Серьезно? А во сколько начинается?
Примерно в 9.
Да, утра?
Как утра? Конечно, вечером.
Ну да. Ну, пока.
Пока.
Очень хорошо. В этом диалоге, помимо того, что мы с вами научились просто спрашивать о том, что вы делаете, когда начинается что-то, aside from learning very simple chit-chat, what are you doing, we're going to the movies, when does something begin, there is a really good set of phrases there. Here's the first. Во сколько начинается урок? Во сколько means at what time, of course. Начинается, begins, and what begins is at the end of the sentence. So, во сколько начинается урок? At what time begins the lesson? Since урок is what begins, literally we're saying начинается begins itself. Хорошо? Okay? And my answer was лекция начинается в 9 or в 10 утра. The lecture begins at 10 in the morning. Хорошо? So once again, it's the lecture that begins. It doesn't begin something, but begins itself. That's how we've got the ся there at the end. Хорошо? If I were to say that I begin a lecture, which we do next, is я начинаю. We don't put a ся there. So, я начинаю лекцию в 10:30. I begin the lecture at 10:30. Please note that 10:30 having a period between 10 and 30. That's how we do it in Russian. So, looks like $10.30, doesn't it? Хорошо. In fact, it gets even more confusing once you start dealing with more complex numbers. If you've got something like, 10.3. In Russian, that's actually going to be 10,3. But a lot of European countries do the same thing. So, you may have seen that before. Очень хорошо. Okay. Think we've had plenty of grammar. We have counted to the point of exhaustion. Before we quit, let's go ahead and look at a commonly used saying, and that is медленно, но верно, which means slowly but surely. It's really not a saying as an adverb would be, as a proverb would be. It's more of a cliche, and while for a native speaker to use cliches like slowly but surely we're coming to the end of this long and exhausting lesson seems ridiculous, for somebody who's studying a foreign language, it is really helpful to learn those, use them as fillers. They show that you know the language. They give you a chance to waste a little bit of time and actually think through what you're gonna say. So things like unfortunately, к сожалению, slowly but surely, to tell you the truth, frankly speaking, all of those parasites, you should think of them as really good friends. Хорошо? Okay, so on that happy note, let's go ahead and see what we did today. Here's the overview. So what we did today is looked at the use of adverbs in addition to verbs there, like я хорошо знаю, я плохо читаю, etc. We looked at a few quick time phrases, and then we spent most of the lesson dealing with exact time expressions. A lot of counting. Looked at a little bit of reflexive verbs. Очень хорошо. Your homework is going to be to conjugate a few more verbs. Начинать, учиться, кончаться. Some reflexive, some not. Of course, practice the vocabulary. Try applying the dialogue to your classroom situation, and also read all of the texts, all of the little dialogues in the book on pages 169 through 171. That's quite a bit, but you know most of it. Очень хорошо. На этом мы с вами закончим. Всего доброго. До свидания.